Hey guys, welcome to episode 7 of the Inner Pivot Podcast. I wanted to thank you for joining me today, and I wanted to offer you 5 different ways to improve your life now and a way to integrate these separate improvements to create a more cohesive and continuing path for your own growth, development, and evolution. I'm not claiming to be a guru of any sort or anything like that, but I have used these tools myself and been the benefactor of integrating them into my life. And I've seen the results both in my ability to step out of ways of reactivity and the material improvement in my conditions. That being said, let's get into it. So, the first and most important tool is waking up from automatic reactivity. The Tao Te Ching says that awareness of ignorance is the beginning of wisdom. So, what does that mean? That means awareness of how little you know is the beginning of your own liberation from reactivity. So, like, if you're constantly being driven to emotional reactions by, maybe things happen in politics or your personal life or relationship, these emotional reactions are your trauma bubbling to the surface. Be it in this life or another, something happened in the past that's causing you to relinquish your free will and give it to give the reins of your future essentially to a past version of yourself that's hurt and unhealed. So it's important to both acknowledge and be aware of your trauma responses, but also stop yourself from responding to everything with trauma. Because if you never heal the wound, then the lesson will keep festering. Because all suffering is a teacher. All hardship is a teacher. So if something's causing you to react, and it's a negative emotion like anger or hate or fear or whatever, that's a teacher. That situation is your guru and drag. So the first step to like stepping out of that is taking a few deep breaths. Like count to 10 before you react with anger or you make like a off the hip angry remark, especially to someone you love and care about, but in people in general. And the next step is like just elevate the frequency of that response, right? So perhaps something's going to make you mad and you'd respond with anger. Well, elevate it to humor. Poke some fun. Now the best way to handle it is just to step out completely and react and respond with love and compassion. But that's easier said than done, like most things. So the second tool I want to share with y'all is the tool of interrupting the loop or breaking the cycle. So everything exists cyclically, and the more attention you pay, the more you start to catch on to the cyclical nature of things. Because if you're always living in waves of reactivity, well, there's a few core things that cause you to react. And these core things, if they're causing you to react in the same trauma response, they're going to yield the same results because you're not changing anything in your reaction. The set dressing, the circumstances, the material nature surrounding it may be different. But at the core, you're still dealing with the same trauma response. So you really have to figure out new ways of interrupting and interjecting the reactionary thought patterns that tend to manage most of our lives. So that feeds right into the third thing I wanted to share, which is feed the mind with depth. How do you break these cycles? How do you wake up from your programming? Well, you have to introduce new information and expand your perspective and expand your horizons. So like if you're someone who is constantly trying to achieve maybe financial success or find love or whatever, while reading books that will, or even listen to podcasts, whatever, that could help you achieve those goals or at least understand the nature and circumstance that help you achieve those goals is so important. Like, a great example is actually finding love. I read this book years ago, maybe like 15 years ago, called Calling in the One. And I thought it was going to be like this manifestation, you really got to, specify how you're going to manifest the right person. And it wasn't about that at all. It was about reflection. It was about looking inward. It was about figuring out, why you feel this need to find the right person, or why you feel incomplete when you're not in a partnership, right? And as I read that book more and more, I realized that like most of my interpretation, understanding of what a relationship was painted with trauma, and that's not a healthy way to enter anything. Another great example is the book The Secret itself, right? The book The Secret is a great way to start tuning in your mind, or realizing the power and potency of positive thought. But as you dig deeper, it goes far beyond positive thought, and there's kind of two veins of study here. The first one would be Hermetic principles, right? Something like the teachings of the Kabbalion, right? They essentially, mind is the universe. Mind and matter are one. Everything is made of mind. So what does that mean? That means that everything that you are experiencing is a reprojection of your inner world, right? So your inner world and its contents are painting the world around you. And even in like a psychological way, that's deeply true. So like if your inner world is one that's angry, then you're desperately looking for things to be angry about. There's this saying that I think Ram Dass said it. Even through the eyes of a thief, even a holy man is but his pockets. So whatever you're looking for, you will find. So if you look for things that will cause joy, you'll find joy. If you look for things that'll be an opportunity for you to learn and grow, then you'll find opportunities to learn and grow. And if you look for things that will enrage and disappoint you, you will be enraged and disappointed. That being said, the other vein of interpreting and understanding this is actually more, scientific, which is the quantum physics, quantum mechanics angle. Like we know that everything is waves, essentially, of frequency. So like, people who stare at a random number generator and try to make it have 2 or 3 consecutive the same number can cause these effects. Even like the frequency, because everything emits a frequency to some degree or another, the frequency of gold changes based upon whether or not someone's staring at it and wanting it. So like we know with our scientific instruments that our minds in some way, shape or form are affecting our reality. And how much you believe that affects how true it is. That's why there's a placebo effect for like every FDA medication that or medicine approval. They do a placebo effect trial, so they know even in the scientific and medical community that to some degree or another, belief has an impact greater than or equal to medicine. Now, I'm not saying that's the case for everything or whatever, but that is such a known phenomenon that it is part of the FDA approval process and has been for a long time. So the fourth thing I want to share with y'all is the importance of mastering your breath. Every 90 seconds of deep and conscious breath resets your entire nervous system. So essentially your breaths tell your body what kind of chemicals to release so that they can influence your thoughts and behavior. So the short, shallow breaths, which are super common in the West, no one really taught us to breathe properly, so we just automatically find ourselves in those short, shallow breaths. And the short breathing and shallow breathing leads to anxiety, the fight or flight mechanisms always being active, and it creates cognitive dissonance. So if you're always breathing and not being mindful, and your breaths are short and shallow, you'll find that you're always kind of anxious, overthinking, stuck in the material realm. And if you take these deeper breaths, just like ideally a deeper breath that has a longer exhale than inhale. If you do that for 90 seconds, you'll literally feel better because the chemical composition that your brain is creating is one that's going to put you at ease and one that's going to be more relaxed. And from that state, you can take in, understand, and interpret larger quantities of information, right? And the biggest component to your own growth is your ability to take in new information that allows you to expand your perspective and horizons. So the importance of breathing is directly tied to essentially everything that you do. And it's such a simple, easy thing that, like, a lot of time we brush it off. And for years I did. For years I would hear this stuff and think it was woo-woo nonsense. But then as I got into meditation and started trying this stuff out, I realized, like, okay, if something pissed me off or frustrated me, I would sit down and breathe for a couple minutes. Just deep, slow breaths, deep, slow breaths. And I always 100% would feel better. And it also, over time, I think just changes the resting point of your like your vibes, your emotions, your feelings, whatever. It just changes what is normal for you. So if you wake up anxious every morning, take a few deep breaths and make that part of your ritual. And then over time, that anxiety in the morning dissipates, because everything is on a loop. Everything is part of a cycle. So the more things you do to break the old patterns of behavior that made up who you are or who you were, it allows you to become who you are going to be or who you are meant to be, which is always going to move you in the direction of being of service to others, telling the truth, loving everyone. The thing that I want to offer y'all is taking extreme ownership. There's a great book called Extreme Ownership. It was written by a Navy SEAL, and it was actually given to me by a company I worked for, and they give it to every brand new employee, from the lowest to the highest. Everyone gets that book and is expected to read it. And the thought behind it is giving people a common architecture of ownership. A lot of the times when everyone in a management team or whatever reads the same book, that book gives you communication and understanding tools to interact with each other and have a common core understanding of one another. So like that book, Extreme Ownership, really gives you the tools to change your perception of what's happening to you. Because every single thing in your field or in your reality or in your life is something that you've accepted or chosen by the virtue of your own reactions to things, your own actions towards things, or even perhaps some sort of agreement you signed before you incarnated. But everything in your field is in part your responsibility. And there are some things that make it hard to accept that if you're just looking at it from a linear 3D model, right? The third dimensional model. But as you expand in different dimensions of possibility, like the fourth and fifth dimensions of consciousness, when you factor in things like, death not being the end and reincarnation being part of your process, just like it's part of everyone's process of growing and expanding as a soul and a spirit. When you factor that in, it's easier to accept hardship and suffering for yourself and those you care about and those around you, because you see it as the teacher that it is. And a lot of the time, those who suffer most in this world serve as examples and teachers themselves. And often they find themselves trying to ease those who suffer along the same path. But that being said, the bullet point here is find a way to talk yourself into taking ownership so that you're not waiting on someone else to give you closure or for a perfect circumstance to unfold for you to have peace. To give yourself peace now, accept things as they are. So the final thing I want to share with y'all that helps you integrate all this stuff we just talked about is actually the basis of alchemy. It's transmuting all of this into, or transmuting like your negativity into momentum. So whatever happens to you, you have no control over. But how you react to it, how you take action in correcting it, and how you break the cycle that got you there is all up to you. You have to pay attention. First and foremost, like pay attention and catch the cyclical nature of your situation and circumstance. And so once you catch that cyclical nature, transmute it. So if you catch yourself reacting to something with anger, become aware of what's causing that anger and where it's coming from, and then shift out of it. What does that mean? Well, it means just slowly leveling up or improving your mood reaction, right? So if your first reaction is to be angry, shift into humor. If you can shift into humor, then shift out of humor and into a deeper awareness. Like if someone's saying or doing something to get you to react with anger or frustration, it's usually indicative of their own trauma and of their own, like suffering manifesting, right? Like people use others as a mirror more so than even talking to people. We're constantly looking into the eyes of others and seeing ourselves. And however someone treats a stranger is indicative of how they treat themselves. So like when you deal with someone who's kind of like a Karen, reacting to them is what they want. They want to feel seen and heard, and you can still make them feel seen and heard, but by ignoring their negativity and not reacting to their negativity. So that being said, what does transmuting negativity into momentum mean? Like, what's the momentum building towards? You want to build momentum towards a version of yourself that is of service to others and that is the most morally and intellectually honest version of yourself. Because if you want to see a change in the world, it starts from within. We all have to be the change we want to see in the world. And what that looks like is you growing and you changing. And through the conviction of your own growth and its results, others will bear witness and they'll look at you and they'll want to be like you. Like, hey, this dude used to be super pissy and negative, and all of a sudden he's positive, he's happy, things are going his way. He treats everyone with kindness and compassion. Karens just get a little humor and then it goes back to kindness and compassion. Like that kind of way of being will create change in others just through them bearing witness to it. I think we live in a society that wants you to proselytize your beliefs and tell everyone why, your religion or your political beliefs or your this and that are right, when you really haven't done that much work in developing your own worldview or spiritual view. Most often, we've just been indoctrinated into whatever we were born into. And, those who are most sure of themselves are the ones who are the most filled with ignorance. I never trust anyone who's super sure about something. Like, for example, if you talk to a pastor and you kind of break up all their arguments, they always revert back to, well, if you don't believe this, you're going to hell. And that kind of fear-based manipulation on a spiritual basis is probably one of the most evil things that we do. And it really furthers my own belief that like the Gnostics were onto something, and that's why the Catholic Church outlawed their beliefs, because there's no positive version of God that wants his those who spread his message to threaten everyone with going to hell. So, and if you dig into the Bible specifically, the rapture wasn't even a thing. So like the judgment day wasn't a thing. If you look in the teachings of Jesus, they seem to be the antithesis of this, and here's the thing, a lot of people haven't read the Bible. So people will go to church and have someone else read them the Bible and pick the excerpts that they think are the most meritful and valuable for people in that room, and never actually crack the book open themselves. And I know that spirituality is a journey that we're all on together, right? So like my own spiritual development evolution is tied to that of everyone else's. And so like I have to be willing to be of service to others if I want to grow spiritually or if I want to see anyone else grow spiritually. And we all have to do the spiritual work. There's no shortcut. There's no like, oh, I accepted this guy into my heart, so now all of a sudden everything I do doesn't matter. Like, what did Jesus say? What you do unto the least of my brethren, you do unto me, right? So everything that are okay with happening to the poor, or every negative, wicked thought you have towards someone else, you're having towards Jesus. Like, that's what he's saying. So what is that like alluding to? It alludes to the golden rule, this golden rule that exists in every spiritual practice, essentially. Treat others as you want to be treated. Treat others like they're Jesus. If you treat everyone like they're essentially your savior, you're going to treat them with a lot more compassion and empathy. And it doesn't mean listen to people and accept everything they say without thought, but approach them with the same level of compassion, reverence, and awareness that you would approach Jesus with, right? And that's a real deep thought if you think about it for a moment, because how did Jesus lead his life? Did he lead his life passing judgment? Did he lead his life threatening people with hellfire? No. He got nailed to the cross and felt love for everyone who put him there. And that is what Christ consciousness is. Christ consciousness is not, passing judgment and, hating immigrants, and whatever version of Christianity exists in America is like the antithesis of Christ consciousness. But that seems to be the nature of the matrix that we live in, where, like, when you wake up, the irony becomes obvious. The doublespeak becomes obvious. And then when you're sleeping, the obvious becomes a choice. So nothing's obvious unless it aligns with your pre-existing beliefs and notions, right? And you see this all over the place. Like, to this day, I can't understand why people have such a lack of compassion for what's going on with immigrants in this country, especially considering, there's nothing else good going on. Like, you're deporting a bunch of people and, destroying free trade. And at the same time, like, everything's getting more expensive. The only people getting richer are billionaires because they're getting tax cuts. And there's still tons of people who go through the world like this. Oh, no, Trump's so great. But, Trump is a great test of common sense. Like, this is a dude who, for decades was the best friend of who, and was probably the most mentioned guy on his list. But there's people who you could show evidence to, they can stare at it and then completely ignore it. I always go back to this reference of, like, there's this video of Trump, telling this 10-year-old girl, hey, I'll be dating you in 10 years. And I just ask people, like, okay, was there ever a point in your life where you hung out with somebody and they said that to a 10-year-old and you just kept hanging out with them and associating with them? Because, like, to me, I don't know what I would do to a person like that, but it would probably be, beneath my ideal reaction, because there's just an obvious pattern and behavior that's just disgusting, reprehensible. And people are willing to ignore it. Why? Is it because they're well informed? No. It's because they've kind of diminished the level of information they're taking in to align with their own cognitive dissonance. And, these behavior patterns, like ignoring the suffering of children in favor of a, billionaire from New York, they only serve evil. Like, it's obvious, it's blatant, it's right there in front of you. Now, that being said, you can't know evil, or you can't know good without knowing evil. So I also know, like, on one layer, there's this, a visceral reaction to the, just disgusting character of a lot of world leaders, but specifically the leader of the United States right now. And, there's also the spiritual understanding that for us to know true goodness, we have to know true evil. These things are connected. Yin and yang can't exist without each other. That's why there's that little dot on each side of yin and yang. Anyhow, I've gotten a little off topic here, but ultimately, I hope you can use these tools to help improve your life. I know that right now it's tough for a lot of people, and I just want to offer what I've gathered knowledge-wise and, put it out there in the hopes that it may serve you. Anyhow, thank you for tuning in to the Inner Pivot Podcast. I hope you have a great day. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.